2003 in the Iraq War. That war, by the way, was directly concocted by Netanyahu and his colleagues in the U.S. Pentagon. I'm not saying that it was a link or mutuality. I'm saying it was a direct war. That was a war carried out for Israel. It was a war that Paul Wolfowitz and Douglas Feith coordinated with Netanyahu. In September 20th, 2001, that it would launch 7 wars in 5 years. And you can listen to General Wesley Clark online talk about that. He was NATO's Supreme Commander in 1999. He went to the Pentagon on September 20th, 2001. He was handed the paper explaining 7 wars. These, by the way, were Netanyahu's wars. The idea was partly to clean up old Soviet allies and partly to take out supporters of Hamas and Hezbollah. Because Netanyahu's idea was there will be one state, thank you, only one state. It will be Israel. Israel will control all of the territory. And anyone that objects, we will overthrow. Not we exactly, our friend, the United States.
And this is one of the fears that people have, is that we're shutting down the Ukraine war in order to pivot towards Iran, because Netanyahu would love nothing more than for us to start a war with Iran, go to war. And one of the things that you also said during your speech to the parliament was that Iraq was very directly a war for Israel. This wasn't a link or a mutuality. This was a direct war on behalf of Israel. They've laid out a plan. They want 7 different wars, and Iran is the pinnacle of that. And now they've accomplished. I mean, you got to look at the wars, the 7 wars. What were those they started off with? And they've really accomplished pretty much all of those objectives over the last couple of decades.
6 out of 7.
Right, and the last
6
one
out of
is
7.
the last is Iran. So
the story
yeah, what
here is just to add a nuance to it. At the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union ended in December 1991, already the people in the White House, and Paul Wolfowitz was already there, Dick Cheney was already there in George Bush Sr.'s Department of Defense. They said at that time, okay, now we run the show. Now we can clean up the old Soviet allies. Soviet allies like Syria, like Iraq, like Libya. Now comes Netanyahu. He becomes prime minister in 1996, a few years later, and he's surrounded by American advisors, many of the same people. And they come up with a document called Clean Break. The idea of Clean Break was to put an end to any discussion of a state of Palestine. Israel's going to own the whole property, period, and no state of Palestine. But they knew something. They knew that the neighbors, especially at the time, Saddam Hussein was one, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya was another, the Iranians were a third, were supporting the Palestinians, including through arming belligerents, arming Hamas, arming Hezbollah. Now, Netanyahu had a very simple idea, crude but simple. The simple idea was Israel's going to run the show, and if anyone opposes that, meaning it could be Assad in Syria, it could be Saddam in Iraq, it could be Gaddafi in Libya, we're going to overthrow them. But with one footnote. It's not actually us. It's our best friend, the United States. And this was American policy. And those on the inside of the Pentagon, State Department, National Security Council have said this in many, many. How much the Iraq War was a setup, how much it was Feith and Wolfowitz and Netanyahu, which were promoting this. And you go back and you watch Netanyahu, who came, for example, to Washington in October 2002 to tell the American people how wonderful the Iraq War will be. You know,
Mhm.
everything will go well with the Iraq War because after Saddam falls, oh, the Iranian young people are going to overthrow their regime and so forth. Netanyahu has been a cheerleader for these wars, but the idea is kind of a mix of ending the Russian alliances in the Middle East and doing Israel's bidding. This went on for a long time. When Wesley Clark, who was the NATO supreme commander in the 1990s under Clinton, went to the Pentagon a few days after 9/11, he was famously handed a document that said 7 wars in 5 years. This is this plan that I'm speaking about that also
Mhm.
Dennis Fritz writes about. The 7 countries are Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and Libya.
Mhm.
If you look at this, we've been involved either directly or through proxies in wars in 6 of those 7 countries. Lebanon till today with the Israeli occupation, overthrowing Syria, which was a project that started with Obama, overthrowing Saddam Hussein, which was the 2003 invasion, overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi, which was the 2011 NATO operation illegally exceeding a mandate from the United Nations, arming the opponents of Sudan to break that country in two. Now it's 2 countries, each one with a civil war in Sudan and in South Sudan, and Somalia funding other countries in the region to go to war in Somalia. So actually, there have been 6 of these 7 wars. It's no secret that Netanyahu's been begging for the United States to go to war with Iran.